thank you very much, Malcolm, for this pretty amazing introduction. Not so sure I deserve that much, but thank you. Much appreciated. So it's my pleasure to be here today. I'm very excited to talk to you about what we have called small jet mine. Hopefully you will understand why of the title while we go through the presentation, but basically what I'm going to talk to you today about is how studying enzyme can help us fuel the energy revolution. So I thought before we start, I will tell you a little bit about me. So I'm originally coming from Spain, the southeast of Spain, at a city called Alicante, and there is where I studied my undergrad in chemistry. Last year of which I earned a fellowship to go to Denmark to do my final research project. After that, I returned to Spain to study a master in chemistry, but specialized in electrochemistry, science and technology. And after finishing my master, I moved to Germany, and there, near Düsseldorf, this area here, close to the Netherlands, I started my PhD, my doctoral degree, in the Max Planck Institute for Chemical Energy Conversion. After I finished my PhD, I stayed within the Max Planck Society to do my first postdoc, and then it was in January 2020 when I joined the University of Oxford for my second postdoc in the inorganic chemistry laboratory. And then last year I was promoted. Sorry, sometimes yeah, the slides are not working now. And last year I was promoted to independent research fellow, where I'm starting to build my own group. So that said, I would like to first tell you why I decided to pursue a scientific career. What really got me into the scientific world. That was actually during my school time when I was a kid, and it's when the teacher, I still remember that day, was explaining about the planet in our solar system. So I was super curious about it, and that really got me into science, and I started reading a lot of scientific books to understand the solar system. I felt, and I still feel, it's fascinating. And then from there, I started to read more and more science, and that's how I got into it. So I was particularly interested in chemistry itself, and I was always trying to find chemistry books where they describe some chemistry activity, small experiments that you can do at home. I'm not so sure my mom was super happy about it, but that's what I did. And apart from that, I always wanted to explain my parents what was going on. No, you see this? Do you know what that happened? This is because this, and this. And I think from a kid, that's how I was developing this scientific interest. So the main thing is that I was curious to understand why things happen. Yeah, to be able to learn more about the scientific secrets that nature entitles. So that's basically what took me later on to do my undergrad in chemistry, and after my undergrad to decide to be a researcher. So I decided chemistry as my main focus because I wanted to continue learning about how chemical reactions happen in this world, about basically how chemical reactions are the power of this world, to keep us moving. And I decided that being a researcher, I could do my small contribution to change the world and to make it a better planet, always using science as the tool of doing that, of making a change. So hopefully throughout the presentation today, I will also wake some of your desire to learn more about science. So now moving on, we need to start with something that maybe is not that happy, it's a little bit sad, and it's basically all the headline news about the energy crisis and how the prices of fuel and energy are all over the place, especially at the moment, right, nowadays. So that is a good example of the motivation behind my research, and that's no other than energy sustainability. So the energy problem that we have nowadays. So we need to turn and to transfer our energy system into a renewable energy system. And how this renewable energy system will work is we will make use of renewable sources to generate fuels. And then these fuels will be used on demand to generate electricity. So to power our phones at home, to power our cars, to power the buses and so on, the public transport. So the problem with this main system is that it's not that easy. And for this system to work, we need catalysts. So catalysts, they are substances or compounds that speed the rate of a reaction. So basically by lowering the activation energy of the reaction. Hopefully these are concepts that are familiar to you. So the main problem nowadays, the main problem that we are facing, and time is really approaching us, is that we are lacking of efficient catalysts for producing these processes, and we need to look for catalysts that are based on earth abundant metals. So that means cheap metals, so cheap materials that are easy to find, to obtain, and therefore to scale up for being used in this energy system. What's the approach I'm using? So look into nature. So there are entities in nature called enzymes. We will learn about them in a minute, that they can do these energy conversion reactions. So let's go look in nature and find inspiration from nature to develop better catalysts. Before we start, I would like to give some examples as how fuel cells, a system that a word that should be also familiar to you, and we are going to learn more about it in the next slide. But I want to give first examples how this fuel cell application can actually be used as potential solution for the energy problem. So probably one of the main examples is how these fuel cells can be used in medical sensors. And one example is the glucose biosensor. So here we make use of electrochemistry to measure the amount of glucose in our blood. And we do that by using an enzyme, this entity that I was talking about that we will learn more in a minute. And this enzyme is called glucose oxidase. So we can also use fuel cells for petrol alternative, for example, to fuel our car. So that's an example of a hydrogen powered car, where instead of using electricity stored in a battery, what these cars are doing is produce their own electricity through a chemical reaction between oxygen and hydrogen happening here in the fuel cells inside the car. We can also use this fuel cell application for remote energy access. So for example, for producing energy on site by using microgrids that basically they are powered with clean and alternative sources like solar, hydro, or wind. We can also use this application for biofuels. So instead of using petrol, we will use biofuels, and that's any fuel derived from biomass. So for example, plant, algae, or animal waste. So hopefully these are clear examples that we are having them nowadays in our current system. And now we are going to learn a little bit more how these fuel cells work. So basically in a fuel cells, what we are doing is capturing the energy released by a redox reaction to generate electricity. And this electricity is going to be used later on demand to power our house or whatever is necessary, yeah? So in a fuel cells, what we have is in this red electrode, the fuel is coming in and is getting oxidized. And then these electrons that are released, they are going to this blue electrode, where these electrons are used to reduce oxygen into water. So by having these two reactions, we have a current flowing, and this current generates electricity. Yeah, and this electricity is the one that we make use of. So next, we are going to go a little bit more in detail about the small yet mild, so enzymes in nature. So I introduced the enzymes at the beginning of my talk, and now we are going to learn a little bit more about them. So basically, proteins are large biomolecules consisting on a chain of amino acids, like you can see here in the pictures. What are enzymes? So enzymes are proteins found in nature, and they are very important in nature because they catalyze chemical reactions that are absolutely crucial for nature. So basically, the term catalysis means that they are able to accelerate the chemical reactions happening in nature. Yeah, so they make possible the life to know the life like we know nowadays, just because they are catalyzing, they are making faster all the reactions happening in nature. So that I will keep going. How an enzyme works, you may be familiar with the term lock and key concept. So we have here the enzyme, and the enzyme is our lock, so the lock that we use in the doors, and then we have the substrates, and the substrates are the key. So basically they fit perfectly into the enzyme lock. So once the enzyme comes, it binds. Once the substrate comes, it binds to the active site of the enzymes, so we're calling lock, and then it's able to convert the substrate and release a product. Yeah. What is very interesting is that some of these enzymes found in nature, like I told you before, they are able to catalyze, so to accelerate reactions that are absolutely central to the societal energy problem that we were talking about at the beginning. So let's go take a look at all these enzymes in nature and learn from them. That's what we are going to do now. So hopefully I'm going to take you on a trip through nature to discover and learn a little bit more about these enzymes found in nature that are absolutely essential for catalyzing these reactions that are directly related to the energy problem. So one example is photosystem, and this enzyme is involved in photosynthesis. That you should also be familiar with this term. So where we found the photosystem? So we found it in all plants and green algae. What it does, it uses water and CO2 and the energy from sun to convert it into glucose, so into sugar. So the biological use, that is the technical reaction that is doing. So basically it's oxidizing water to oxygen and protons and electrons. So it's able to capture the energy from sunlight to catalyze the water splitting that we call the water oxidation. And then this is used for photosynthesis, yeah, to later on generate glucose. So how we can use these enzymes in biotechnology? So potential use is for water splitting, a very important reaction, because it's a clean way of producing hydrogen. And we will see later on, and we have seen in some of the introductory slides, that hydrogen can be used as an energy vector to power our world in a sustainable energy system. Another example are the hydrogenase enzymes. So these enzymes are found in bacteria and algae. And basically what they use is they catalyze the interconversion of hydrogens with protons and electrons. So by doing this reaction, these enzymes, the hydrogenases, they enable bacteria to produce energy, either to produce energy from hydrogen or to remove the excess of electrons by reducing protons to hydrogen. So how they can be used in biotechnology? So they can be used for the hydrogen technology. Again, a way of either producing hydrogen or using hydrogen as a fuel to generate electricity. Another example are the CO dehydrogenase enzymes. So these are very important enzymes found in certain bacteria, and these bacteria, they eat CO, they eat carbon monoxide. So the reaction that they catalyze is the reduction of CO2 to CO, and this enables the bacteria either to use CO as a source of energy or to use CO2 as a source of carbon, and that's central for the bacteria metabolism. So how they can be used in biotechnology? So they can be used to capture CO2, so very important. So from all these industrial processes, when we have the release of CO2 gas, these bacteria, they can be used to basically capture this CO2 and use it to produce feedstock. But they can also be used as a CO sensors. You know that's very important sensors, because CO is a poisoning gas. Another type of enzyme found in nature are the formate dehydrogenases. So these enzymes are found in bacteria and yeast, and they catalyze the reduction of CO2 to formate. So these are part of the digestion system of the bacteria, and basically it harvests energy from small molecules like CO2. So how they can be used in biotechnology? So they can be used to capture CO2 as well, and they can be used as a catalyst for chemical production formate. So that's a high valuable chemical in industry. Yeah. So now, how do we study all these enzymes found in nature? The step one is the most important one. So we need to be able to get the enzyme out of the bacteria cells. So here I saw one of my students actually doing that, and here we have the cell growth, so the bacteria growing in an Erlenmeyer flask, and these are how all the bacteria cells look here inside the flask. So later on, we need to, once we grow the bacteria, we need to extract the bacteria, the protein from the bacteria cells. So that's what we call purifying our protein, and then we end up with the protein that we want to study, the enzyme that we want to study. Step two, once we have the purified enzyme, we need to study its function. So we need to know it's active and to know the reactions that they are catalyzing. So how we do that is with a technique to measure their function, their activity, let's call it, and it's called electrochemistry. So by using this technique, once we have our purified enzyme, we can see that the enzyme is active and is doing its function. Then the step three is looking at the enzyme with radiation. So you may come across the electromagnetic spectrum. So there are two types. Basically, the enzymes absorb radiation. So one of the radiation is the visible light, and then that's a way that we have to measure the enzyme. But some enzymes, they also absorb infrared radiation. And I particularly work with this infrared technique and study the enzymes that absorb infrared radiation. So that's step three. Then the step four is solve the structure of the enzyme. So know how it looks like, how the active site look like together in this big protein enzyme entity, right? And then we do that with X-ray crystallography. So first we need to crystallize our enzyme. We get this beautiful crystal, and then we are able to shoot X-ray at the crystal and solve the crystal structure of the enzyme. So to know how the active site look like. And then basically here is where the substrate binds, yeah? Once we have these crystals, they're powerful substrate to study them with different techniques. And for example, we use in my group infrared microspectroscopy. So it's basically see how these enzyme crystals absorb the infrared radiation. So now let's put enzyme in action. So when we had this trip through all the different enzymes found in nature and how we are able to study them, so how we are able to produce them, to extract them from the bacterial cell, purify them, and then study its function and how they interact with radiation. Now we want to put example, how we apply these enzymes, how we apply this enzyme in our current world for the energy problem. So here is an example of how we can use enzyme in a fuel cell to generate electricity. So in the red electrode, we have an enzyme called glucose oxidase. And in the blue electrode, we have an enzyme called lacase. So this enzyme, the one at the blue electrode, is going to react with oxygen. And this enzyme, glucose oxidase, is going to be able to react with glucose. So when we put them together, they perform the redox reaction that we saw before in the fuel cell, and then they generate a flow of electrons that generates a current, and this is the energy that we capture. Yeah. So to put an example, here we have the two enzymes in the electrode. So that's one of the glucose oxidase enzyme, the lacase enzyme, already absorbed in the electrodes, in the red and blue electrons. electrodes, sorry, and now we are going to put them together and connect them by a multimeter to capture this electricity, yeah? So that's an example how we are doing that in the lab, how we are creating mini enzyme fuel cells to generate electricity. So basically here, what we are doing is to put in the both electrodes together, but separate them by a membrane. So you see, first one electron, then the membrane, then the other electrode. And now we are basically going to wrap them together. Yeah. We clip them so they don't fall apart. And then we are going to connect the cables of the multimeter. So remember, we connect we are dipping them in a solution that conducts the electricity. And then we connect now we are in the interesting part. So now we connect a cable to one of the red electrodes that we were looking at before, one to the blue electrode, so one where the glucose oxidase is, the other one where the lactase is. One oxidation is happening, the other reduction is happening, and now when we connect the multimeter, you can see that we have a current flowing. Yeah, we have generated electricity, so now we can use this electricity, yeah, to power our car, to power the heating in our house, etc. Okay, so what have we learned today, and what is the take-home message that we need to bear in mind? So hopefully I was able to show you that by studying nature, we can get inspiration and find solutions to the climate crisis. So it is clear that we need to store energy to be able to later on use this energy on demand to power our house, to power cars, etc. I hope I was able to show that fuel cells are promising solutions for this renewable energy system, and that some enzymes found in nature, they're able to catalyze reactions that are absolutely key for energy sustainability. So we need to study these enzymes to be able to learn from them, to understand how they work, and later on we can use this enzyme in fuel cells to generate electricity. So I hope that gave you a brief but nice overview about the renewable energy system and how we can use enzymes in fuel cells as a possible solution to the energy problem. And with that, I would like to finish, and I'm more than happy to take questions. Thank you very much.